My name is Lea Jechel, and I'm an evaluator here at DEWAL. And I would also like to introduce Marion Krämer, our team leader for this research project. She will join later for our discussion session. So I'm sorry for being a little bit delayed. I hope everyone managed now with the interpretation styles and everyone can hear me now pretty well. So I'll start the presentation. Today's presentation is about the findings and also some additional products that come from our larger research project that we started more than 3 years ago here at DEWAL in Bonn. And the project is essentially about rigorous impact evaluation in German development cooperation and the use of rigorous evidence and other evidence types for policymaking and programming. And I have to accept this. All right. So just to give you a better understanding of what we have planned today, here's an overview of the structure. So just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, I will give a quick introduction what RIE and rigorous evidence is, or how we define it. And then I will talk about our research question and the empirical foundation. And then we'll jump right to our findings. So what is the status quo in German development cooperation and what are the problems? And how do we expect to solve these problems? And in the end, we would like to generate also some takeaways for you. So after having learned so much about the problems and solutions for Germany, in the end, we would like to provide also some tips that could be helpful for you and your own work, at least hopefully. All right. So to introduce the topic, I would like to go back to a very basic question and ask, why do we think that rigorous evidence matters so much? Looking at several studies about the results of evidence in different sectors, Howard White, the former funding executive director of 3RE, stated the following quote in 2019. It appears that there is in general an 80% rule. That is that 80% of things don't work. So as good Bayesians, in the absence of rigorous evidence, we should assume that our program doesn't work. If your project doesn't work, then these are resources that could have made a real difference in other projects or, for example, in variations of your own project. So in order to find out which are the projects that belong to the 20% that indeed do work, we need rigorous impact evaluation or rigorous evidence. And evidence, in particular, rigorous evidence, can tell us what works and what does not work in development. But maybe now let's go one step back again and talk about what do we mean by rigorous evidence or rigorous impact evaluation. I'm sure that many of you will likely already know that, but a quick recap for everybody. RIE is an evaluation approach that allows to detect the causal impact of an intervention on an outcome of interest. So to make statements about the causal impact of an intervention with maximum certainty, we need a control or comparison group that mimics what would have happened in the absence of our intervention. So there are different ways or methods how to create these control or comparison groups, for example, through randomization, that's called an RCT, or other quasi-experimental methods. Today, I don't want to dive deep into the methods part, but I just want to make clear that by rigorous impact evaluation, we mean the concept of having a control or comparison group. And since rigorous impact evaluation is quite long, we use the abbreviation RIE, and that's what I'm going to use now throughout the presentation as well. And there are two further products in our rigorous evidence toolbox, and I quickly want to mention them. I'm sorry for this definition and abbreviation part right now in the beginning, but I learned that this is a lecture, so we are here for learning. And the first thing I'm going to introduce is called systematic reviews. So if you take many RIEs together, on a certain research question or intervention type, and you summarize these RIEs systematically, then it's called a systematic review. It's important that they have clear criteria for inclusion and exclusion of primary studies. They have an explicit and transparent search strategy. They have systematic procedures for data extraction. And in the end, it allows you to derive general conclusions that are independent from the context where one of the single RIEs had happened. So this is called systematic review. And secondly, evidence gap maps, or in short, EGM. If you graphically visualize in a map which scientific studies are available for a certain topic or a research question, that's called an evidence gap map. That's what you can see here in the picture. So it allows you to identify evidence clusters and also evidence gaps. And it can be therefore of substantial help when designing new interventions, because the gaps in the map, they give you an idea about where is a lack of evidence. So where do we need more research? Where are the things that we do not know if they are working? And the bubbles, what you can see here, this is the evidence in the map. And they provide an easy and fast access to potentially relevant studies that could inform your decision making. So these are the things where we know if they are working or if they are not working. So these are two evidence products that are quite important, and I will just go along now and they will pop up in the presentation later on again. All right, in order for you to know what the results are based on our research, I will present now the research question and how we analyzed it. And it's important to keep in mind that we had a two-sided approach. So we always looked at the implementation side, so how to generate new evidence. And then we also looked at the usage side. So what happened with the findings based on scientific studies? So it's the implementation and it's the usage. All right. The first question was, what is the status quo of rigorous impact evaluation, implementation, and usage in German development cooperation? Then we looked at what are the barriers for RIE implementation and evidence use in Germany. And finally, we wanted to know, okay, what are the solutions for these barriers? So how can we address them? And to answer these three questions, we had a whole range of different sources and instruments. And just to mention the most important ones, we conducted several surveys. We conducted more than 50 interviews. We did document analysis, and we also used secondary literature. Okay, before I continue, a quick note, our report holds many more details, and I cannot present them all today because of time constraints and everything. So I just want to focus on the most interesting things, and everything else you can just reread it in our report. And that's why I'll just jump to our findings. And I will first cover the side of conducting RIEs. So the three main findings are coming here now. First of all, German development cooperation has made first experience with RIE. So we found 97 RIEs since 2014. So almost 100 RIEs were implemented with the involvement of German actors. And we see a slightly increasing dynamic. Even though this is more than we anticipated, the overall incidence of RIE compared to the German ODA volume is quite low. And maybe most strikingly, we did not find any systematic approach or strategy with regard to the implementation of RIE. So it is not embedded in any overarching learning strategy and usage of rigorous impact evaluations. And I brought you one graph that gives you an example what type of other insights you can also find in our report. For example, here you can see the RIEs that we detected according to the different sectors. So 23 RIEs were conducted in the sector of agriculture, forestry, fishing, followed by health, what is not quite a surprise because health is a sector where a lot of RIEs are conducted in general. However, we also found RIEs that are conducted in sectors which are said to be quite difficult that rigorous methods can be applied. For example, in the government sector or also for social infrastructure and services. So that was the side of conducting RIEs. And now we're coming to the side of use of evidence. So now I will present you our 3 major findings regarding why is not so much evidence used in German development cooperation. Firstly, we can say that the results from self-generated RIEs are sometimes used at project level, however, not for strategic decision-making. Then we can say that the global RIE evidence base is largely underused. What do we mean by global RIE evidence base? These are rigorous evidences that are conducted not within an internal, so a project or an organization, but they are publicly available, for example, through published reports or in peer-reviewed journal articles. So everything that is publicly available that is based on scientific methods and standards. In these publicly available global RIE evidence base is barely used. And lastly, project documents often refer to impact. So they claim that a project is really effective, but without providing any control group-based justification for this claim. So project documents give an evidence stamp, but actually without any proof of evidence. So that means overall, German development cooperation does not look very evidence informed right now, neither for the side of generating evidence, nor for the side of using evidence, at least in a systematic way. However, we also got a good message. That's why I brought you this graph here. German development cooperation would like to use more evidence. As you can see in our survey, we got almost 1,000 responses for this question. And the dark blue area are German development professionals who think that it would be helpful for the quality of their daily work if they could use substantially more evidence. And actually, this is important to note because the question explicitly refers to their own work. So not evidence use in general, but if the respondents themselves would be willing to use more evidence. And 75% said yes, they would like to. So based on these findings, what I just presented right now, I'll do a little recap because we were a little bit puzzled during our research. Firstly, we heard that evidence is important because it tells us what works and what makes our work more impactful. Secondly, people working in German development organizations believe that evidence makes their work more effective. So they actually would like to use more evidence in their daily work. And this means evidence is also desired. And thirdly, evidence is actually largely underused. As we saw through our scientific evidence, as we saw that scientific evidence is not very common in German development cooperation. So as we can see, the third piece does actually not quite fit with the first 2 pieces. And then we asked ourselves, why is evidence underused? So even though it's important and it is desired, what is hindering German development cooperation from being more evidence informed? What are the problems? And we identified many different barriers why evidence is so underused and why RIEs are conducted so rarely. And these barriers are very much interrelated with each other. We have described them in our report and analyzed them more in detail. But today I don't want to present all of them for you. It's a lot. But we picked some of the barriers, some of the most important barriers to show to you today. And if you would like to get in more in detail, I'll also recommend to you to read the report. Because quotes are fun, I brought a quote for each of the problem I will present now to you, but there's many more analysis behind it. So let's start with the first barrier. It's called limited RIE knowledge. And the quote goes like this. It's not like everyone would feel particularly well when they are confronted with things like experiments or statistics. There's something like a barrier of know-how. And I also brought a graph that underlines these findings. So This is also a graph from our survey, and it shows how familiar German development professionals are with the concept of rigorous impact evaluation, systematic reviews, and evidence gap maps. So the 3 evidence products I just introduced to you in the beginning. And the further we go to the right side here, we see that they do know not a lot, so barely anyone knows the products very well, and they even have not heard about it. Much like the little girl in the picture, they're just confused what are these concepts and are not familiar with it. All right, let's have a look at the second barrier I brought today. It's called no differentiation between sources of information. And the quote goes like this: for the project manager, evidence is evidence. How you get to the result is not something that a project manager cares about. Whether I can say with 96.6% certainty it's like that, or I can only say, in my opinion, it's like that. The project manager treats both insights in the same way and not any differently, just because one was generated with an RCT, so with a randomized controlled trial. So all types of evidence look actually the same, and there is no awareness that causal claims actually also need causal methods. And last but not least, a short and crispy third problem that we found: no requirement. And people said that the ministry does not require it, so we don't do it. Many more barriers you can find here, but I'll go back to our puzzling puzzle. So now we know some of the problems that are blocking the evidence use and the evidence generation. And the question is, how can German development cooperation overcome this? To change the right side of the puzzle, to go from evidence being underused to Germany being an evidence-informed actor. And based on our empirical research, we developed an approach that consists of 7 action points that German development cooperation and its different stakeholders should take right now to become more evidence-informed. And since we have time left, I will share with you some of the homework we recommended the German development community. And maybe there are even some aspects that you might find useful also for your own evidence agenda. All right, let's have a look at here. So firstly, we propose that German development actors should identify relevant topics and evidence demands to guide RIE implementation. And this action point is about making it all more systematic when it comes to generating new evidence, so that evidence generation is not so fragmented and scattered as right now, but instead rigorous evidence is systematically answers the most important question for GDZ. Secondly, we need to raise awareness and develop capacity on RIE evidence generation and evidence use. So more people need to be aware of evidence concepts and have some basic knowledge, as we have seen in our first quote earlier, that this is a big problem. So this is what we also call evidence literacy. Number 3, we propose that German development cooperation. Sorry, I think someone got unmuted. But I hope everyone still can hear me. German development cooperation should establish a public RIE database to strengthen RIE knowledge management. And herefore, we are happy to announce that we already started with this homework. So there are already some databases for evidence. For example, we can recommend the 3RE development evidence portal, where you can find lots of studies. However, the aim of our database is also to strengthen the RIE community and to provide network advantages. So therefore, you can also find the contact details of RIE implementers from science and also from practice. Fourth, we propose to install a support structure for knowledge brokering and to support RIE implementation. What does it mean? In such a model, existing decentralized structures that are already there in the implementing organizations would be further strengthened by a central structure to coordinate the efforts and to promote inter-organizational learning. So to give you just some examples, this means, for example, converting evidence into simple and user-friendly formats, such as that evidence use gets easy and is more fun for people to get used. Or another aspect would be to provide practical support and tools for RIE initiation and implementation. This might mean, on the one hand, to link practitioners and researchers, or also, on the other hand, to provide material that simplifies the RIE implementation process, like checklists or guidelines or videos or templates. And here as well, you can see I'm about to draw the check because we started to create already different tools, and we built a microsite where we regularly publish these new resources we create that supports RIE implementation. Action number 5 is that we need to require, or at least to incentivize, a systematic check of whether projects are suitable for RIE. And closely connected to this point is the next one, because we also need to require or incentivize using the best available rigorous evidence. And here again, I'm about to draw the check because recently there is the initiation to revise different formal procedural documents, for example, from the ministry or for implementing organizations, and to integrate in these formal documents the evidence use. And last but not least, we propose that German development actors should provide additional resources dedicated to RIE and the using of rigorous evidence. And as you can see here, we draw a check because there is already, or DREWA launched a funding program which provides funding for several RIEs in the upcoming years. It will be possible to apply for the funds there, and our team at DREWA supports the implementation of the RIEs. But of course, this is not enough, and it's only a first small step made by DREWA. But nevertheless, other stakeholders also need to make resources available here. So as you can see, this is a huge set of actions. And we hope by implementing these, it will be able to connect the pieces of the puzzle, and German development cooperation becomes more evidence informed in the future. Sounds complicated, but we're on it. All right, so now, last but not least, as I promised, I brought to you the top 6 things to strengthen evidence-informed decision-making more in general. So maybe that is also for help for yourself. Because our aim is making more evidence-informed decision in the field of development cooperation. So put differently, to make use of what we already know what works. And here are our 6 tips based also on our research. First of all, get trained in RIE methods. So to be able to recognize RIE opportunities and also to conduct RIEs, but also how to interpret them. This is what I called beforehand evidence literacy. Secondly, familiarize yourself with existing evidence portals. As a start, for example, visit RIES evidence portal, or also visit our own evidence portal that is specialized for German RIEs, but get used to it and find yourself your way through the portals and how you can use the different filter options and what you can find there. Third, don't only rely on evidence that was generated within your project. RIE evidence is often already out there, so go and find RIEs, evidence gap maps, or also systematic reviews and make use of it. So enrich your work with existing rigorous evidence. Fourth, include a dissemination strategy in your proposals. So with user-friendly formats, and that way you can increase the reach and the impact of your own work. So if you are creating evidence, if you're conducting evaluations, for example, The way you disseminate it is one of the most important things. And to have user-friendly formats, we learned, is a key essential. Fifth, consider maybe commissioning an evidence gap map and a systematic review if you have the resources. We know that this requires lots of resources, but you are contributing to a global public good, and the products will be useful for so many other actors in international development. So we are sure that it's worth it. And last but not least, differentiate between different sources of information. That's the point we just heard the quote on. I'm not saying that everyone right now should only do RIEs, but you should be aware that different confidence levels and different sources can provide different kind of answers. So if you have a causal interference, you want to prove, you need causal methods. And make project managers aware of these differences as well. All right, so these are the 6 tips. Hope you wrote them down. But if not, that's the way you can reach us if you still have questions. So either via mail or Twitter, or you can also go ahead and look at our microsite. We're always happy to receive feedback for everything. And now we're still quite early. We have lots of time left for discussions and question and answers. And I'm happy to now invite everybody to participate. So maybe I will just stop the presentation here at this point to see you all better and see if anybody has questions or feedback or just wants to contribute something.
So Lea, I saw that there is already one comment in the chat, so I might just read it out. It comes from Santiago, and he says, good morning from Mexico. Thanks for the presentation. It reflects common challenges in the evaluation world. I would like to know how the German corporation received these findings. Did they have resistance or critics to the evaluation, or did they receive it well?
Thank you for this question. It's a very good one. Should I start answering it right now? Yeah. Okay. So for the interviews, for example, we conducted, we had a large audience that we asked. And we think that it's important that everyone in the end feels represented also in our research and also in the report. So by saying that there is a lack of resources, for example, we articulated a problem that many people working in German Development Cooperation are faced with. So yeah, that was actually one of the most important points. Marion, do you want to add something at this point as well? I have to think about.
Yes, so I mean, we are proposing kind of a really systemic approach, right? We are really proposing that like large changes should happen, like if you change like the processes and integrate like checking if a rigorous impact evaluation would be possible, that's it has large implications. Or building up a support structure would mean really hiring a lot of people who would work at knowledge brokers at different positions in the system. So obviously there is always resistance to large changes in systems. But kind of what we are trying to do is kind of highlight the benefits that you can get out of it. And I think what we learned and what we heard in the different types of evidence that we collected is that there will be costs at the moment to change the system, but there will be huge benefits in the long run. So that's kind of the narrative we are trying to convey. But in general, I think the advantage of our study is that it's really, like Leah said, it's really evidence-based. So it's not that we came up with it because we think it might make sense, but this is really what the evidence says.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems like Santiago is happy with the answer. Then there was another comment or question if we could share the presentation. Yes, I think we can just send an email to all the participants and share the presentation with you. And we also have like a website which Leah showed on the last slide. So there you also find all the insights and a lot of information. I can just share it again in the chat, the link, so you can just click on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that just came in another question from Costa Rica. I would like to know from your experience, which is the best way to ensure or to try to that evaluation results will be really took in consideration by stakeholders, how to ensure its use. Maybe I can start with an answer, and Marion, you can jump in again. So what we've learned so far is that you have to differentiate between internal evaluations and external evidence. And as far as we can, or as far as we learned from the German development community, is that internal generated evidence in form of evaluations, for example, are used quite well. So they start learning from their own evaluations. So if there's, for example, a follow-up project, they are looking at the evaluation of the first project, of the first part of the project, and take the lessons learned from that one. The bigger challenge we see right now is that they not only use their internal generated knowledge and evaluations, they are important, of course, never they have to be used, but there's so much more evidence out there, and especially evidence that is rigorous in the sense that I just presented. So scientific evidence how things are working. And we think it's also important to make sure that this kind of evidence is also somehow manifested in these procedures and in the documents. Yeah, I think that's the first part of the answer.
Should I take over the second part? Yeah, so I think that's a very important but also very difficult question, and I think it needs a lot of different factors. And one is that the evidence needs to get really, really easily acceptable. So what we like to point at is the UK What Works networks. I don't know if somebody from the UK is in the room right now, but they are kind of really like toolkits where you can see from like within a minute or so, you can get an idea which interventions work and how much do they cost, and which interventions don't work and how much do they cost. So make it really, really, really easy and really aggregate the evidence to as much as you can. And then I think it's also very much a cultural change, like having a culture of learning and failure and accepting failure and not blaming failure. And kind of this cultural change often comes from when really leaders live it. So if you have a lot of people in crucial positions that are really keen to use evidence, this might trickle down in the whole organization. So this might be two factors that are crucial, but in our report, you can find, I don't know, 10 more things that might also be beneficial. But I think those two are really crucial.
Thank you.
So, Emmanuel, this was your question, or?
Yeah.
Did you have another one? Okay.
But I think there is another one. Again, from Costa Rica, from Eddie. He's working in the Ministry of Planning in the field of evaluation. And he would like to ask what do we think about the main conditions to implement RIE in the public sector, for example, and the use of information later.
Should I start with this one, Leah?
Yeah, please go ahead.
The main conditions to implement RIEs. So luckily we have developed a toolkit, which is also on our RIE website. So this is basically a list of conditions that should be fulfilled or that you should work towards that they can be fulfilled maybe in the future. And there's one part which is called feasibility. So there you can really check, okay, is it technically possible to find a control or comparison group here? Can I generate the data that I need? So much more from a technical point of view. But then there's also the question, does it make sense? Because a rigorous impact evaluation is not always the best method to apply. So what we found is it could be applied much more often. It would be beneficial to apply it much more often. But you should check if it really makes sense in the particular project that you are having. And then there you also find it's kind of a checklist. I can also put the link in the chat later.
I'll do it.
Oh, Leah, you do it, yeah. Yes, and that's kind of the conditions that need to be met. And then use the information later on. This is very much related to the question before. So really make it easily accessible, sorry. But also for the internal evidence, we also learned that it's really important to involve like all stakeholders right from the beginning in order to create ownership. So really decide jointly on the research questions you are having and be aware of when the results are needed. Really work together, do it jointly. It's a collaboration of researchers, implementers, policymakers. You want to add something, Leah?
Yeah, maybe one point, what also becomes clear now what you said, but there are challenges in implementing RIEs, but there are challenges that are possible to overcome. So if you are aware of them and aware of the difficulties that you might face, there is lots of potential, or let's say like a range of options that you have to solve these problems. For example, one important aspect you have to consider is ethical considerations. So a lot of people say that with an RIE, there comes a lot of ethical challenges, but these ethical challenges can be solved in different ways. And you just have to look at it and consider all these things. Yeah, but I think that also become clear now what you just said, Marianne, and I'm about to link our toolkit here in the chat, so you can have a look at it.
So there was a follow-up question from Sanjay, and then I'm jumping back to Eva. So Sanjay asked, you said RIE may not always be possible, but isn't it important to take such evaluations when we think from the perspective of value for money, cost effectiveness? Yes, it is. I would totally agree. I mean, rigorous impact evaluation is the best way to tell us if there was really an impact. So kind of cause and effect are really clear. So the effect comes from the intervention. And then obviously that's the best way to think if the intervention was effective. But still there are projects where you literally can't create a control or comparison group. And then there are also other evaluation methods which kind of try also to find causal impact, but obviously that's then very difficult and it's possibly rather, I mean, not so rigorous anymore, but possibly still the best you can do. So, I mean, it shouldn't mean that whenever you can't create a control group, you shouldn't look at impact, right? But then you have to use another method. what we are saying is just if you can create a control and comparison group and you can do much more often than you think, then you should go for it, because as you're saying, it's also when you look at cost effectiveness, the best information that you can get. Hope that's clear. Okay, there was a question from Eva. Having in mind that development work has a huge cross-cultural component, international development agency culture versus host country culture, how do you incorporate the local cultural aspect in the rigorous impact evaluation? Are the local stakeholders actively included in the rigorous impact evaluation process, and to what extent? Leah, you want to take this one?
Yeah, maybe I'll start to answer the question with the following thought. I think it's not so much different like in other evaluations as well. So the aspect to recognize the local conditions and to have this participatory approach is something you have to keep in mind for every evaluation you do from an outsider perspective. So if the German development community conducts an evaluation, no matter which method they are using, this is something you always have to consider. And for RIEs, I would say that in the case, for example, for the data collection, for if you work with surveys, that is also a method that you can use in RIEs. They have to be sensitive. These are very steps on the micro level where you have to involve the local people and the local culture, and have to be sensitive culturally and also for the participants. And I think that's completely possible to do this. It's a challenge. But if you're having it in mind right from the beginning when designing your RIE, you can do it.
Okay, and nothing to add.
Yeah, nothing to add?
No. So there was, so Santiago shared a similar checklist from Carnival, which you can also check in the chat. And then there were two thank yous. So actually you're also very much invited to kind of unmute yourself and post your question directly. If you have another one, I mean, you can also use the chat, but that's not required. Also nice to hear some voices, or just share your own experiences. Any thoughts, reflections, comments? Oh yeah, or maybe you're all busy looking at the website. It might also be the case.
Yeah, maybe we can also show the website in the end again if people are interested.
Yeah, so maybe let's do that, Leah, right? We
to
can
share the
also
website?
Yeah, and maybe we can also show the database.
Yeah, of course. There is a question. How much Deval open to cooperate with other groups? For example, in capacitating in RIE. I'm not sure if I'm clear with the abbreviation here.
Me neither.
Maybe Sanjay, you can clarify what VOPS is.
Evaluation organizations. Okay. So in general, we are very open to that. It's just that in our team, we also have limited capacity, and we kind of have to check if we have the resources to do so. But for instance, with For CELAC, we are planning to do something by the end of the year or beginning next year. So just approach us with the concrete idea you are having in mind, and then we will see if it kind of fits to our own theory of change of what the project should have and what impact the project should have and our capacities.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we can at least say that we identified trainings as also one of the major tools, how to interact with people and how to make capacity building work. So maybe I will, if we still have time left and some people are interested, I will just show you our microsite that we built. So the motivation behind this was that, I mean, we are preaching that we need evidence formats that are user-friendly. So it's very much more fun to interact with a website, for example, and to learn the results of research in that way, compared to, I don't know, reading a research report is PDF with 150 pages. So since we wanted to make sure that everybody is reading our results, we created this website. And it's like a pilot project where we also learning from right now. So I don't know if everybody's seeing it right now.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, so we are the first microsite at DEWAL presenting our findings this way. So here you can see our menu in the heading. So we started basically with definitions. What is RIE? What is systematic review? What all of you know now, and what are evidence gap maps? And you can click on it and you will get some more information. And we even linked some examples here. This is an evidence gap map from the 3IE development evidence portal. And here you find our report, so structured according to our research question. So again, this two-sided approach that I told, so generating new RIE evidence and using evidence, and then the status quo, barriers, and the action points that we recommend. Now I can show you one part that I didn't include in the presentation. This is our database, and it looks like this. You can still, if you conducting an RIE and you are funded from the German ministry, then you can register your RIE here. So this is the place where new RIE are registered. And here is a link to 3IE's evidence portal that you can browse to find many more studies for international development cooperation and that are published. And here you can see the filter options that you're having for our database. So you can select sectors, you can select countries, and there are additional filters. For example, if you're only looking for specific organizations or regions, or you only want to see, for example, RIEs that are completed or that are still ongoing. So here we have an example of an ongoing RIE, and you can just click on it, and then you'll see a website more in detail with more information on this RIE. You see a small abstract where they explain what they were doing in their evaluation. Then you can see the involved organizations, which country it took place, how was the funding, and many more informations, which methods they used, for example. Then you find, in the case there is a publication, you find the linkage for this publication here. And then, as I said, you also find contact details of responsible persons, either from the implementing organizations or also from research, that if you're interested in especially this RIE, you can contact. Yes, so right now we have 97 RIEs listed in our database. I mean, it's not helpful for you, but you can switch it into German language as well, but it's also available in English language. And yeah, we're trying to keep it updated by continuing registering all the RIEs. Yes, that's basically it.
And just
yeah.
to add, so I mean, that is one of our recommendation, and that's obviously the idea is to make the existing evidence, so particularly for the German Development Corporation, so studies that have been either been financed by the German ministry or where the intervention had been financed by the German ministry, to make them accessible. Plus to create a network. So as we have the contact details below, this gives people working in German Development Corporation the possibility to kind of network and interact and ask, how did it go? How did he do the RIE? How did he use it? What were the problems? So accessibility is here really the main motivation.
Yeah, thank you. Moreover, you find information on our website for the funding program I just introduced. So since it's not started yet, there is not a lot of information you can find here, but it will come soon. And here you can find more resources. For example, our report and summaries. And also, for example, we made an explanatory video that explains very shortly what RIE is in English language. Yeah, that's the website. It's a growing project. So every time we're creating new resources, we'll upload them, and yeah, it keeps it kind of vivid and a learning by doing process.
Any questions on the website, maybe?
Yes, hi, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi, I'm Lilian Raub. I'm working for GIZ, and I'm actually working in a project where we actually do rigorous impact evaluations. And for the coming project cycle, I was hoping or proposing to the superiors to continue doing them. But of course, there's a lack of funding. So actually, I'm interested in the, if you have some information, because I'm keeping like an eye on your website, but at what point there will be more information about it. And maybe also some criteria, if you know already, like, yeah, more about that.
Yeah, very good question, and good to hear that that you're doing RIEs. So there's one person not muted. Can you check that you are muted? Thank you. Again, another person is not muted. Can you recheck that you're muted? That would be nice. Thank you. Yes, so good to hear that you're doing RIEs and that you really would like to do it in the next phase as well. The team is currently setting up the whole process, and I think they are planning to select the projects until the end of the year. So it's just a rough guess. I'm not 100% sure because they're just in the process right now. But I could imagine that like they would start selecting or asking the implementing organizations, including GIZ, to propose projects maybe in the late summer. And it's not restricted to any sector or so. So as of now, the planning is that the condition is that so that the project has to be funded by the German Development Corporation, so by BMZ. But I'm pretty sure you will hear about it, because I guess they will widely inform that the application process starts.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you can do is, if you have not done it before, you can how do you say, use the DEVA newsletter, because it will be published in the DEVA newsletter for sure. It will not come too often, so it's not, you're not stressed by the newsletter, but there you will get the information for sure. And of course, through our Twitter channel. I'm not sure if you're on Twitter, but there you can also follow us and we'll publish it there as well. So you don't have to check yourself the website now and then, but hopefully we will channel it in these versions as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on the newsletter, so I will keep an eye.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
I think there was one more question about the funding part, but I hope we answered it now.
Yeah, so actually, so the funding is for rigorous impact evaluations that are supposed to be done within projects of the German Development Corporation. And there will be a structured application process by starting late summer, possibly. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So I think we spread lots of information now today, and everyone is satisfied. No more questions. But I shared our contact details. So if there's anything else you still want to know, or you want to give feedback or have questions for our research, then just go ahead, write us an email or follow us on Twitter. And I think that's it for now.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interest and for listening, and have a very good rest of the day.
Yes, also from my side. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.